Concerning to love, before I go to another side, how personally?
Hey, how do you love?
How do you feel, or let's say, what does love mean for you, and how do you receive it?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. And, so to some extent I try not to have in this work a definition of this is love and then we see if it works, but we ask these questions all the time. What does love mean to you? What does care mean?
Hello everyone, welcome again on CD Show. I am CD Sedikan, and today I'm here with Professor Schulz in Bremen, and today we're going to be talking about lots of very important topic, which is love and peace in relation to conflict and peace, right?
Yeah.
So, and I think this is something that everybody wants, peace and love, right?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, that's what we're here to spread.
That's what we're here to spread. So finally, I think Philip is going to introduce himself, and then we start a discussion concerning to Philip's research on this specific topic. So, Philip, thank you so much for inviting me and for having this conversation with me. Which is very important, and I think if anybody can share love and peace within this globe, I think you will be better for the whole world.
Absolutely.
So, looking forward to this conversation, and for the benefit of our viewers, maybe you can tell us who you are.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for coming, Sidi, to meet me here at my house to have dinner. No, not dinner, lunch with me. Not that late yet. And for inviting me to be on this show. I'm really looking forward to your questions and the discussions we'll have. So my name is Philip Schulz. Yeah. I live here in Bremen, Germany. I'm a father of 2 young, wonderful children. And in my free time, I'm also, in my professional life, I'm also a lecturer and postdoc at the University of Bremen here, at the Institute for Intercultural and International Studies.
Okay.
And I've been doing research not only here in Bremen. I was working at different universities in Sweden and in Northern Ireland before, but I've been doing research for the last 10 years now on conflict-affected communities' experiences. So the ways in which communities impacted by violence and conflict and also displacement experience these situations, how they engage with these situations, what their harms and their injustices are, but also how they engage with some of these experiences. So oftentimes I think there's a focus on people who have survived conflict or displacement to be portrayed in these very, passive ways, as if they would have no agency or control over their lives. Yeah. And I've always been interested to look at how they do have agency and how they do have control and how they make choices themselves, how they respond to some of their experiences.
Wow.
And I've been doing most of my work so far in northern Uganda, where there has been a very brutal and very long civil war for almost 20 years between a rebel group called the Lord's Resistance Army and the Ugandan government. And I've been doing work there ever since I finished my bachelor degrees, my undergraduate studies. Wow. And much of my work was focused on the experiences of men who have been sexually violated. Okay. So male survivors of sexual violence and conflict, which is a group that doesn't really receive a lot of attention. We rarely ever talk about that. When it comes to sexual violence, again, it's mostly a view on women and girls as victims, and men are always viewed as the perpetrators. And for most part, I think that's true, but there's also, as you know, there's an exception to every norm and an exception to every rule, and that also holds here. And so I've been studying the experiences of this group in particular for a long time.
Wow. So guys, you can hear how amazing he is. Me being really, I don't know, maybe I am kind of curious of your work, because after when we met and then we talk, I find out that you are interested to research more about this topic, and I was like, wow, I find this very interesting and inspiring. And now I'm even more inspired hearing you, trying to also, try to research more about the most vulnerable people that we don't even know about, So, so I'm looking forward to everything you really have and what inspire you more. But like our first question is going to be much more about that, like what you just disclosed. So as a researcher, so what was the first thing that inspired you to research about peace and love, and let's say that is connected to conflict and peace?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, as I said, much of my work so far has been focused on these experiences of violence and injustice.
Yeah.
And I think that is also the dominant trend when it comes to discussions about that. You know, when you look at the media portrayal, it's often focused on violence and suffering and harm.
That's right.
And in research, it's also often the focus on that. And while I was doing my work with these male survivors of sexual violence, and I was asking them about, you know, what does justice mean to you? What, you know, do you want in response to your suffering? You know, how can you be helped? Without me ever asking directly about these elements of love and care, they kept directing my attention and our attention to exactly these experiences. Yeah. So I was never asking them, oh, how do you, you know, what does love mean to you? How does love come up in your work? Yeah, we had these conversations and then they, you know, shared examples. So what, to give you one concrete example, these men that I've worked with, they are organized in a support group, kind of like your, well, there's some resemblance, I think, to the Buddies of Bremen work, where, you know, people who share a lived reality and experiences, they come together and they share stories, you know, they do some activities together. And so these men have kept telling me about how, you know, within these groups, they care for one another, they're there for one another,
support each other.
They support for one another, there's empathy there. And so I was curious.
They feel,
that's true. You know, when you hear these stories and you think about, you know, these groups of people, the most vulnerable, you know, those who are marginalized, you rarely ever think about them in relation to love and care, because the dominant scripts and the stories that we're exposed to lead us in a different direction. And so I became, you know, curious about that. And then we just, before we started this interview, we spoke about my friend Evelyn Amoyne, who has been abducted by a rebel group, who had, you know, to go through the most tremendous experiences and the suffering. And in conversations with her, she also kept telling me these examples of, you know, she was telling me things like, I'm sort of paraphrasing her quotes now, but things like, you know, within the rebel groups, there was so much suffering and violence, but there was also love. You know, we cared for one another. People who were in the similar situation, who have been abducted,
support each other.
We supported. We had some bonds of love. You know, there was a family-like sort of cohesion there in units. And so these different stories, and they happened, you know, years ago over time, they made me become more curious in this. And, you know, then I think there's also a moment where there has been a shift in my own personal life where now, you know, I said I have 2 small children, so I'm in a position where I do a lot of care, you know, I take care of them in the morning, I get them dressed, I get them ready for school, I cook them lunch, I cook them, you know, like all this care work. And so I think at some point it was becoming also, and I think you also know that maybe yourself from the work that you do, that it becomes very demanding of you as well to always be centered on violence and suffering. And so I was seeing this moment in my own life where care was taking center, and I also wanted to sort of use that and center care in my own research. And so that's sort of how, you know, one thing leads to the other. And now I'm at this moment where instead of focusing only on people's experiences of harm and violence, I'm in this very fortunate position where I can focus on people's experiences of love and care and how they coexist with violence, right? So the point is not to say there is no violence, there is no suffering. It's there, it's ever present, and I think you cannot deny it. But I think it's not what defines people. You know, violence and suffering is not the only defining elements of people's experiences. Even if they suffer and experience violence, I think they can still have moments of love and care.
100%.
And they exist, you know, side by side oftentimes. And maybe sometimes they also influence one another, you know. One of the things that in my research I'm interested in is also to maybe not just look at where there are elements of love and care in people's life, but also maybe what the, you know, transformative and productive potential of that is. How can a relation of care help someone to make sense of that? And again, I'm thinking a lot about the groups that you do where people have all these experiences of suffering, you know, but then they get together and they share food, they share each other's company. Sharing is caring. They care for one another, and I think maybe that's a way in which, you know, we can also find ways of supporting people more in their everyday experiences.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing this with me, because you bring it up, these examples of how people tend to understand each other just because of the same experience they have, you know, and yeah, so for that being the case, yeah, I think this is. I mean, if you start to love people, if you start to care, then you find out that you really want to do it. You know, you want to continue doing it because that there is. I don't know for other people, but I think you experience it. You know, you tend to have this feeling that okay, I think I'm doing something great, and I tend to have this wonderful feeling in me that what I'm doing it's really incredible, and you can see people like appreciate at least the small thing that you do just to care, you know, for them, because there are people who really don't believe that people care about them.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Or people even love them.
Yeah.
So if there is somebody who really cares, you know, to at least share love and care within that community or in the whole world, I think they will be grateful for that.
Absolutely.
100%.
And it's such a, as you say, it's a give and take, right?
Yeah.
Like no one, you know, all of us are dependent on care.
Yeah.
You know, like from the moment you're born, you need care until the moment that you die, you need care. Yeah. And all this span in between, you know, you give so much care and you receive so much care that sometimes we don't even notice it, maybe. You know, it's so taken for granted in a way. And that's what I'm so interested in it. It's so universal. Without care, no one of us would exist. Yet it's not really considered, you know, for certain groups of people, for instance. Well, so, you know, they're not viewed as caring or care-worthy, you know, groups of people or loving and lovable groups of people.
Maybe you might give us maybe an example of what you have done, and then you sit home and then feel like, wow, you know, something that you might never forget after.
That's a good question. Yeah. And I have to think about that a little bit. I think there's different ones. I'm also just at the beginning of doing this work, so I'm hopeful that there are more moments of that to come. But I mean, one very concrete example, as a, you know, from a place of research, is that many of the people that I've started to speak about this with, whether here in Germany or also in Uganda, they seem delighted by the idea to talk about that, right? So like in Uganda, again, there has been the civil war. Lots of people have come there to support them, to work with them, but also to research them. And they always ask very similar questions. It's always about, you know, tell me about when were you abducted, you know, who harmed you, what have you suffered, how have you suffered? And I'm sure the same also applies to people, you know, who maybe come as forced migrants here to Germany. Tell me, you know, like what was the discrimination you experienced, what was the violence you've experienced, and maybe they don't ask it so directly even, but if it's not framed in such a direct way, maybe in more indirect ways. And so when then you know, would sit down with some of these people in Uganda, for instance, and they were like, okay, now there's another, you know, Muzungu, a white person asking me interviews, I'm sure they will just want to know the usual things, you know, you can already see they were kind of like bothered, you know, okay, let's do this. And then I was, you know, introducing this and be like, okay, let's talk about love. Let's talk about care.
Which is like,
something, interesting. You know, and then they ask question like you, how did you come up with this? It's true, you know, of course. And then they had all these examples to tell and all these stories to share. And then sometimes I think, I don't want to overstate the impact of that, but I think sometimes you could see that they were like,
free to share.
Exactly. And also made to realize sometimes I don't even think about these elements, you know, but now that I talk about it and I articulate it, it's like, it's true. This person has cared for me, I care for that person. We're one, you know, we're living here together in a community, so we watch out for one another. There's also so many positive elements to
I can give an example.
Sure, I'd love to hear that.
Me being brought up in a community, for example, in my country, if you're brought up in a community, you will be taken care by the whole community. So your child is not just brought up by you alone, it's brought up by everybody in the community. If I do wrong as a child in the community, and something that my mom will take care of that, my mom will discipline me. If my mom or my dad is not there, somebody in the community can discipline me, even though my mom is not there, can discipline me. And this, I'm just giving you an example of like, my mom knows these people care about me, and these are community, and they are trying to raise me to become good as I can. You know, so you can see people will call you, they will see you pass through, and they call you, hey, join us for lunch. Sharing, caring.
It's caring.
Today I have it. Maybe tomorrow I will not have something to eat, but my neighbor is having, I can go there and eat. Why? Because caring is
perfect
always,
example. Let's say it takes a village to raise a child.
That's
exactly what.
That's one thing. How do you love to care influence conflicts, and how can they contribute to promote peace?
How care can contribute to promote peace? I think it's a question that we're asking in our research as well. You know, exactly that. Like how if we take love and care seriously, you know, if we put it at the center of our understandings, how can we view peace differently? And I think it can teach us a lot about, who builds peace, who can facilitate peace.
What is peace?
What is peace? What does it feel like?
Yeah.
Oftentimes I think peace, especially again now I'm putting on my researcher hat, but in these discussions in the literature and academic debates, it's often viewed as this very abstract idea of maybe something that happens sort of at the political negotiation table, where some people, decide to write a peace treaty and then they sign it, and it's mostly white men who do that, and then there will be peace there. But then what it really feels like, people who live in that context, is very different, I think.
Yeah.
And so my hope is that, with this research, we can find out more about what it actually feels like for people, what is needed in their hearts maybe to feel peace.
Yeah.
And also, again, who are the people who make that peace possible, right? By maybe, as you say, relating to one another in more peaceful ways, I think. And I think that a lot of this work that is done to promote peace, again, the United Nations, all these NGOs, they do a lot of work, they invest a lot of money in building peace. And I think if they would just approach some of that with more care and with more love, and if care and love would be infused into some of these programs, I think we could get a long way of actually sort of getting there. And I think it starts with the ways in which some of that work is being done, and how people are being perceived and treated in that context, not just as the people who will be at the receiving end of peace, but the people who will be involved in that. And I think care has a lot to teach us in that way to sort of start with, as you said as well in your example, it's all about relations, right? It's all about relationality of different people being involved in that. And I think if we embrace the idea of that and the ethos of that, I think we can get a long way.
I think we can take a perfect example here in Germany. We have everything here. People have all the privileges to go to school, to be in a very peaceful country, although there are things that happen here. But the question is, like I said, what is peace? Maybe people in countries like, let's say, Syria or in Palestine, they will say, okay, Germany is a peaceful country. But the question is peace. What is peace? Do we tend to say Schulz, or the head Schulz or city, feel peace in him? Do you think, if I said I'm living in Germany, that means I feel peace in me? German might be a peaceful country, but what of me?
Exactly.
This is something that, because there are people here, they don't even feel comfortable living in their areas, or maybe they don't feel confident in themselves. Maybe there's not much care and love. This is why they don't feel peace. Maybe they're not they're not happy. All these things are connected, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's so subjective, right? It's for you, peace is not, we don't all share an idea of what peace is, as much as we maybe don't all share an idea of what love is, or what love can be. It's so individual.
This is what I want to say. Wow. Interesting, right? What is peace? So if you have any answer for that, let us know.
I'd love to hear that.
We still want to research more. So Mr. Schulz will be really, really grateful if you can give us your answer in the comments below. Anyway, what are the methods and approaches are using to explore love and care in your research?
Again, we're exploring different ways at the very beginning, but I think one thing that is really central to the work that we do for this project is that love and care is not just an object of analysis that we're interested in, to look at, how do other people do love and care in, other contexts, maybe in the global south, but that we also center that in our research and in our methodological approaches. And I think, maybe if you're interested in this type of topic, that's maybe, in my point of view, the only way to go about it, and to start from that very premise of doing a relational and a care-based approach. So, we wouldn't just come with like a list of questions and a question and be like, okay, so, hello, my name is Philip. What does love mean to you? Have you ever loved? Yes. Do you care for someone? No. Okay. Why not? That wouldn't get you
that is the, So, example, if you want to talk to somebody else and you want to have this, discussion with somebody else, you need to care. You need to know how to talk to the person. You need to know how to bring this person to see where you're coming from, why you want to talk about this. Let them get the flow and then feel comfortable, and then go with it. I can totally get that.
Yeah, and I think you also need to create spaces where people are comfortable for that. So in Uganda, for instance, I've been working, as I said before, there for 10 years.
10 years.
Lots of people. Yeah, the first time I went to Uganda was in 2011, so even more than that.
You are young, so I don't know, 10 years from your age. How?
I was 21 at that time, 22.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, but so I know these people, many of these people for a long time, right? I have good relations with them. I've, interacted with them before. They've helped me, I've helped them. I've cared for them when they were in need. I don't know. When I had malaria, they took me to the hospital and cared for me.
Yeah.
And so we really have this, I think, bond, with many of these people already, that I think we have a starting point to have these conversations. I think it's also, it doesn't work that you just walk into some place. Imagine you sit here in Oldenburg in a coffee shop and somebody comes up to you and be like, hey, whom do you love? Do you, what does love mean to you? You'd be like, that's kind of weird. Yeah. Like, I don't want to talk to you about that in these ways. Basic answer, right? Yeah, like, love means if you have good feelings for someone.
Well, in fact, I can even tell you, why will I tell you who I love?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But so, it doesn't really work that way.
So it could be another way around, like, hey, how are you? Yeah. Good. So when the discussion get to that point, question could be raised. And
it helps, when you know the people, and then you also maybe find ways. Oftentimes the research that we're taught to do in university is exactly like you have a list of questions here, and then you ask them, and it's helpful to do that, of course. Mm-hmm. But they only resonate to a certain extent. Depending on how well you know the people. And so one thing that we want to do is also, so in Uganda, for instance, I'm sure the same for the place that you come from in the Gambia, storytelling is like such an important medium, and people sit around the fireplace in the evenings.
Would you explain that?
It's called Wang O, the fireplace in the region of Uganda. And then maybe one, the elder of the community starts sharing a story, teaches young people something, and then people share and do stories. And we, for this work, we also want to do that we gather people in very, everyday informal settings, and then just sort of throw in a question and be like, hey, so whom do you care for? And then people can share some stories and try out these more informal ways rather than sitting them down, because sometimes having like a book and like a question can be really like a barrier, right?
It's also not. I think it's, for me, in fact,
and so that's what we, and if we are also, so some of this work is being done in Uganda. I have a colleague who's doing this work with me, a good friend of mine called Roxani Cristalli, and she's working in Colombia but also in Scotland. And I'm hoping to do some work here in Germany too. And so, we are looking in different ways, but also want to do it in more, participatory ways of getting people involved, instead of just, sitting them down and asking them a bunch of questions. Maybe there's a way in which that can be done, interactively. Maybe some people like to express themselves not in words, but maybe in drawings. They have artistic talents. Maybe they want to, visualize what love looks to them or care looks to them. And so, we're doing this very slow, because I also think that's part of it, to, do it mindfully and slowly and relationally over time, rather than being like, oh, I now have 2 months to do my interviews, and so I'll sit them down and ask them, but, give people space to actually get to know you, get to know the project, and then trust into it. And so these are some of the, methodological ways in which we're trying to find that out.
Wow, the big words, methodological words.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes, we let people in the university tend to use all these, they don't mean anything, but we use them anyway. It sounds smart. At least we sound smart.
I mean, I totally understand. I know people who use words. I mean, this is also part of the job that you people are doing. The more you do research, the more you read, the more you get. Yeah, exactly. Get to speak like that. Concerning to love, before I go to another side, how personally,
hey, how do you love?
How do you feel, or let's say, what does love mean for you, and how do you receive it?
Okay, that's a brilliant question. And, so to some extent I try not to have in this work a definition of this is love and then we see if it works, but we ask these questions all the time. What does love mean to you? What does care mean to you? Are they the same? Can there be love without care and care without love? And it's producing so many fascinating insights. And some people say where there's love, there's care, and the other way around. And some people say, no, there can be care without love, and, so on and so forth. And I think, on that, I'll start from the back of that question, so I have more time to think about what I mean by it. But I think, I don't think they're necessarily the same. I think there can be care without love. I also think there can be love, or at least people declaring to love, without actually caring so much. So I think they're not, they're very related. They're cousins, but they're not the same, I think. And then I think by love I mean not only romantic love between, a partner, a husband and a wife, a boyfriend and a boyfriend, or a boyfriend and a girlfriend, but I think of love in more broad terms. I think you can love more than just a person, more than just the person who is your partner or who you are attracted to. I think, I have love for my cat, whom you've seen run around here. I have love for my children. I have love for my parents. I have love for my friends. I have love for the work that I do and the, insights I get from it and the stories I learn. I also not only just care, for people in my family, but I also, when I come to Oldenburg and you invite me for lunch, then I feel cared for by you. And when you come here and we cook together and eat together, I feel like I, care for you in a way as well. And then I also think, and this is something that I'm really interested in to explore more, I also think there can be love and care for not just humans and human relations, but also for other elements in our life. So again, I'm thinking about Uganda, and I'd love to hear that's in the Gambia, but people really love the, those who have lived before us, the ancestors, the spiritual world, and they do so much caring.
They're very proud of them.
They're so proud of them. They feel that the ancestors care for them, by protecting them, by making sure that there will be rain for the harvest. They feel they do rituals and, cook certain types of food and bring them to the mountains where the ancestors live and where the ancestors are buried. And so they take care of them. I've mentioned my cat, so I think also there can be relations of love and care between animals and people. Flowers, exactly, landscape, nature. People have really strong relations sometimes to, the river where they grew up and where they went for bathing when they were younger, and so I think that people can have a relation of love to a place. And I have relations of love to certain places, for instance, that, I call home, where I have certain stories that are sort of attached to that and resonate. And so that's what love and care sort of encompasses to me. I haven't given you a good answer about what it means to me, but, what does it mean to me? I'm not really sure. I mean, it's, having a hard time to define that, but I think it, it's like a relation to these people, to these places that, feels good, that makes you feel sort of a warmth in your heart, in your body, that you sort of, are fond of. I think that's sort of what, if, in the most basic sense, if my daughter would ask you, what does love mean? That's maybe how I would try to describe that to her, by being very, hands-on about what that sort of, how that sort of resonates in the body, I think.
I mean, that's the correct answer. I mean, when people told me, if I'm going to define love to people, I'll just say that I would take, like, if you want to exclude the relationship mindset to that, I'm going to say my mom. She loved me to death. She loved me for who I am. If I am going to be, I don't know,